I'm going to show you guys the makeover that we did on this 106-year-old herb garden that we found when we purchased this farm just last summer. I'll make sure and link to the video so if you want to go back and see it in its before state, but I wanted to walk you through the rehab that we've done and some of the things that we have implemented to create a larger medicinal herb garden, but also be able to salvage what was there from the original plants. So this whole area behind me here was a very big, overgrown, weedy mess. There was a few herbs amongst the weeds, and I had grand visions that when we came in here this spring, after everything had died back over winter, that I would be able to dig out the weeds and just keep all of the existing plants. Well, that is not what ended up happening. When I got down here and saw how much a lot of the weeds, there's a lot of buttercup, which is a very invasive type weed here where we live. And then there was a lot of red clover. Now, yes, red clover is medicinal, but in our climate, it is a perennial that creeps and ends up creating such a thick mat that it ends up choking out a lot of other plants. So even though it was a medicinal herb that had medicinal purposes, it was actually choking everything else out. So after evaluating what was actually able to come back up and what was growing and what wasn't getting choked out, I realized that I would spend literally days trying to shovel out all of the weeds to get cleared where there was usable plants. So instead, we dug up the usable plants and put those back in and then created a fresh new bed. And we've actually implemented a lot more. So the first things that we were able to salvage, which we'll go through those first, and then I'll share with you the new herbs that we've been putting in. So our first salvage was back here, a lot of the mullein. So mullein is a biennial, which means you'll actually get the flower the second year of growth. Usually the first year of growth, you'll just get the leaves down at the bottom. Similar to this, you don't always get a flower, but the second year you'll get the flower. So these I was able to transplant, and you can see they're doing great. So these were from the existing garden. And a lot of parts of the country, mullein will just grow wild, but it doesn't grow very wild here. Once you have some seeds and some plants in, usually it will self-seed around that area, but mullein isn't something that I just find growing like along our ditchways or out in fields, etc., like you will in a lot of parts of the country. So it was very intentional on keeping the mullein. And mullein is great, especially for upper respiratory issues. Mullein is very well known for that. So with cough, cold, upper respiratory type issues. So it's definitely something that we wanted to keep going in the medicinal herb garden. And it gets really tall with a really pretty big stalk and a yellow flower, which is why I also position this at the back of the herb garden. And then you will notice I do have some fencing here, which we made sure to keep because the cows are right on the other side, and cows will definitely reach through and grab any plants that they think look especially delicious and top them off for you, whether you want them to or not. So we position this mullein at the back, knowing that it will get nice and tall so that the other plants will get sun throughout the day. Now, the other one that we were able to find and keep, now some of you are going to laugh at this one, but this is burdock. And so burdock is also commonly known as cucumbers, which means you get that's what Velcro was originally invented after, was watching how the cucumbers interconnect with one another. So you get it in your hair, you get it on your clothes, all kinds of fun things. If you were a kid growing up where burdock naturally grows, it's in the woods and in the forests. But we actually, it's funny, when I was a kid, either I just spent way more time outdoors or there was just a lot more burdock around. I used to have cucumbers were everywhere. And I don't see it as prevalently as much as I used to. So I wanted to make sure that I kept some of the burdock here. So it has a really, really long taproot. And it wasn't really happy with me because I accidentally broke off some of the taproot, not realizing quite how long it was when I took that up to transplant it back in. So I have two of them here. This one is even more unhappy. I broke it further. So I may be the first person in history that actually killed burdock. It's actually really hard to get rid of. So we'll see. There's a couple of the center leaves still look okay. But yes, I may go down in history as the first person who actually killed burdock when I was trying to save it. If I had been trying to kill it, I'm sure it would be flourishing. So we'll see how this one does. But I did put this at the back because it will produce the cucumbers and they can get over people. And even though this is a medicinal herb garden, it's also at our short-term vacation rental where we have the farm stay. And so if people have kids coming through, I wanted it at the back of the garden so it wouldn't get stuck to everybody quite as easily. Now, with the burdock, I plan on harvesting the root from these once it's had a chance to get more established, and if this one lives. So at the back, I put in, this was not part of the original herb garden, this is my addition, and this is licorice. So licorice, you harvest the root after the plant's at like 3 to 4 years. So these, of course, are just little tiny babies, but I put those back in here because by that time these are coming up and growing, I will have already harvested these plants and then they would be removed. So we put these back in here. They will get large, but licorice root is really a great one that I like to use during cough and cold season. It can also, for throat, I like to use it for immune boosting purposes as well as in one of my throat tea blends. So wanted to have that one growing here. And then up front here, I have got, I need to get better tags because I know these are not going to last. But this is skullcap, which is Scutellaria lactiflora, or also sometimes known as Chinese skullcap. This is another one that is really great for antiviral properties and one that I use and always want to keep on hand for cold and flu season. And these two in particular are ones that I don't have a local source for. So when I purchase these, I order them from an online source. I don't know anyone that has them locally. So when we were putting in this medicinal herb garden, I was looking at things that we use often, and things too that I'm not able to get locally already, because if I can't get them locally, then other people can't get them locally. And so I wanted to grow plants that not only do we use, but also could be available to the community as well, and that will flower and look pretty. The skullcap gets these pretty purpley blue flowers, and so those are also really pretty. And then here I have bergamot. This is one that is a newer medicinal herb to me, but I wanted to put in the garden. It also is really pretty. So not only is this a medicinal herb garden, but it's also part of a farm stay as well as a wedding venue. So I really need this space to function in multiple ways. So I also was looking for herbs that do have medicinal purposes as well, but also will get flowers on them and look very pretty and create a flower garden feel that if someone was getting married would look really pretty in photos in the background, or even if they wanted to do photos inside the herb garden once everything is up and blooming. So some additional plants that we added in that were not original, here is chrysanthemum, and this one is just have some little tiny blossoms that are just starting on this one. But this one is chrysanthemum gangjuhua. I'm sure I did not pronounce that one right. But again, flowers that have medicinal purposes. And I really focused on this whole herb garden right now is just perennials. So I may add annuals in later, but I wanted to do perennials because one, that's an investment where I plant once and they keep coming back. I don't have to keep starting plants, buying them every year if I'm not starting them myself and physically planting them. I really wanted a garden that would just come back and take care of itself for the most part. I also knew that the weed pressure here was super, super strong. And so we did put down some weed barrier, and then we also mulched really heavily on top. So right now, the only thing that will hopefully come up is just the perennials, because I've cut out in the weed blocker underneath a spot for them to come out. So you can see that I've got this mulched on top. And so I didn't want to put anything that was an annual in, because once that annual died back, then I would have a hole that weeds could just come up from. Whereas now, just the perennials will be covering that, and I won't have, hopefully, too many weeds coming back up through here. So mainly just have perennials in this section. And then this was valerian. So this was some of the original valerian that was here in the garden. And I was able to separate that out. And you can actually see this valerian is in bloom. So that one's in bloom. This is just getting ready to send up its blossoms. They haven't actually bloomed yet. And then this one, I might not even get blossoms off of this one. It was a smaller shoot. This is its first year when I separated that out. But valerian will get really tall. These ones, because they were just transplanted, aren't super tall yet, but my valerian at home, that's once it's really well established, it can get up to like 5, almost 6 feet tall with the tops of the blossoms. So again, kind of trying to be really intentional with putting the taller plants at the back of the bed. So here I've got yarrow. Yarrow is one of my favorite herbs to use because it's very, very versatile. I'll use it with cold and flus and also for wound. It's great for topical use. It's great for using with your wound management, just kind of one of those all around ones. But it also produces really pretty white flowers. And again, beings were also a wedding venue to do cut flower bouquets, and it also just looks really pretty. So this yarrow, it's all this year. So I may get some blossoms from it at the very end of the summer, but because these are all such young plants, I might not get any blooms off of them right now in the early part of summer. Is once they're established, then I will. See, and here is why you can see I have some grass that is trying to come up here. So this is why I definitely did not want to put any annuals in, because even though this is pretty much filling the hole, some of the grass has found its way to the light. So get that out of there early. Now this is from the original herb garden, and this is white horehound, which I was really excited because I do not actually have white horehound at home. It's one of the things I was wanting to add in. Horehound, of course, is known for years being used and added into cough drops, cough syrups, etc., known for coughs and upper respiratory. So this one I was excited about, and I was actually able to divide it out, and I got 2 plants to take home to my herb garden, as well as 3 that I was able to salvage and put back in this herb garden. This one is the biggest. In fact, it's getting ready to shoot up some flowers. And then I added in echinacea. One, because echinacea, of course, has a lot of immune boosting properties, is pretty well known within the herb world, but it also shoots up really pretty flowers, is fairly drought tolerant, and it's just gonna look really pretty. And then here, this is funny, I actually did not plant this, but this is borage, and it was in the herb garden. It's one of the original flowers, and it just self-seeds itself really well. And there was just a little seed that was right at the corner there that popped up when I had cut the hole through the weed blocker to put in this echinacea. So I've kind of got some echinacea that's growing all along here, and some potato that is coming up, as well as the buttercup. So I keep having to come through, and I feel if I can just keep on top of the weeding, not let anything get established, then this will stay really nice and fill in with the herbs. But it is amazing because I have double layered the weed blocker, and I still have some of this grass that is actually working its way through that, and the mulch. So very determined grass there. I have to give it points for its tenacity. Then back here, I've got some more licorice that I planted, another of the skullcap, and then I've got lavender. So I've got some little lavender plants in here, feverfew, because feverfew as well produces really pretty white flowers. I actually think, as far as prettiness in cut flower arrangements, I actually think the feverfew is prettier than the yarrow. It's a little bit bigger blossoms, but both are nice. So we've got the feverfew in here. And then back here, I did put in some marshmallow. So we've got some little marshmallow plants that are just starting back here. The marshmallow root is fabulous for anything that coating wise, like if you have dry sore throat, very mucilaginous properties, also can be helpful for the stomach, has some of its own immune boosting properties. So it's one of my other go-tos. And then here you can see, look at that little borage. It's right on the fence line there. But it is coming up and getting ready to produce its flower and a seed head there, which is why it's so prolific. So a lot of this stuff is still just kind of popping up around, and I'm happy about that. But we needed to make sure that we had kind of this established area that wasn't overrun with the weeds. So here is the other of the white horehound. And then this is the bronze fennel, which I didn't purposely keep this, but I have a lot of it popping up. And so once you've got bronze fennel in an herb garden, you don't really have to worry about trying to cultivate it because it is going to just continue to reseed itself and come up every old which way. And then I've also got a little bit of weeds, but then we've got more of the borage that's just kind of popping up throughout here. So I'm just kind of leaving that and letting it go. And then this is white sage. And some of the little leaves here weren't so happy when I was transplanting it, but I've got some new green growth there. So I think that one's going to be just fine. It's been a really odd spring here thus far because we're actually still in spring. We're not even in full summer. And in the month of May, which is when I'm recording this, the very last day of May, we were actually 2 or 3 weekends ago, we were 96 degrees Fahrenheit here. And that is very abnormal for us in May. So we've had very little rain. I think we've only had 2 days of rain the whole month. And we've had a lot of really, really high temperatures, which has kind of stressed a lot of these plants out where normally they would be just fine. So keeping an eye on them, and hopefully I don't lose any of them. We've got more of the borage that's kind of coming up through here. This was just rock that was already here. This was an old building. There's English ivy, which there's still some English ivy because it is almost impossible to eradicate. As long as I can keep it in check, I'm fine with the English ivy because actually English ivy can be used for cough as well. It actually does have some medicinal purposes, but it's so invasive and it had been left to just go willy-nilly. There was an old building on top of this that the ivy had grown through the roof, it had grown through the windows, it had grown through the sides, it had grown through part of the floor, and so the building had to come down because it was just rotting. And so we turned this instead into a gazebo so that it is functional. And we did keep the trap door. We have the barbecue set on there, but beneath here, there's a shelving system. It was used at one time to store extra food from the house, a bunch of canning jars, and the canning jars are still down there. I don't know how old they are. They still have food in them. So I just left them, but it's not functional for us to use as a root cellar anymore because the river, when this place was originally built, which was in 1916, the river has since cut over more this way. It's actually cut out probably, oh gosh, you used to have to go 2 fields and then through like a little creek and another field before you reach the river. And now it's right at the road. So it's taken out, I don't even know how many acres, which means when we get high water that this all floods and it completely will fill with water. So it's not usable for food storage anymore, but it's a cool historical piece. So you have to sump pump that out. So it's not something that we want to keep as functioning as a root cellar. I wish it could be really cool. But we're just kind of preserving it for historical purposes. So it's still there. And then this actually had part of a shed where this gravel area is. And we tore down the shed because it was starting to fall down and it had a whole bunch of bees' nests in it. So I think I was kind of waiting to see what would pop up here. And I've actually got some lemon balm that's popping up, as well as there's some more foxglove, which the foxglove is just very natural here. But here is actually some of the chamomile. So I'm going to see if I can get this little part transplanted because we're keeping this little section here as flowers. And here you can see this isn't that pretty? I love these flowers. This is the borage when it's actually in bloom. So I'm going to try to transplant a few of these. I was waiting to just see what would come up that had been dropped over the years seed bed wise in this area. And then we are going to put, we use the really high percentage of vinegar. It's like 20% vinegar. And I've been trying to kill back this buttercup so it does not encroach into this part of the bed. I've got some more planting to do here. I did put in some hydrangeas. And I don't know that hydrangeas have any medicinal purposes, none that I'm aware of. But again, this is also a wedding venue, so I wanted some old-fashioned plants that are flowers that are really pretty when they're in bloom. So I put in a couple of hydrangeas on this end, and I'm going to be filling this in still with some more medicinal flowers. I think I'm going to put in some more echinacea, but I'm not 100% sure yet what exactly I want to put in this area. So I'm kind of leaving this open for as creative purposes hit, and deciding which other herbs I want to put in to fill in this area. So if you have any absolute favorites, that are medicinal herbs, perennials, and also have really pretty flowers. I would love to know them. Let me know them in the comments below this video, because they may be something I just have to add in to this space. But we decided here, now that I can have a better idea of some of these and transplant some of these over, we're just gonna then spray the rest of this, like the buttercup and some of these other things that are coming up, the grass, etc., and then put down a triple layer of weed blocker and then re-gravel this so that you could put like a little setting, like maybe a little bistro table or something like that here to kind of be amongst all of the flowers and down, and just another little fun area and way to enjoy the flowering herb garden. Now, this is a little outside of the herb garden because this is actually going to get very big, but we put in quite a few elderberry. So it's hard to talk about medicinal plants without mentioning elderberry, especially when we're talking about perennials. Elderberry, of course, is known for its immune boosting properties. It has antiviral properties. It's really, really great. And it's also pretty. So the elderberry flower, before it turns into the berry, is very pretty. And this will get decently large within just a few years. And if you haven't noticed, right now it's actually a little bit chill because we're in the morning, but it's really breezy down here. And one of the things that's been interesting, because this is just a half mile from our house as we're putting in the different garden beds and putting things in down here, the wind in the afternoon is really, really windy. And so we put in some extra plants in order to create some wind blocks for the vegetable garden that is right over there. And so some of the things that we did that with is the elderberry plant, because it will look very pretty, but it also has those medicinal purposes. And if you are interested in learning more about deep diving into medicinal plants, how to use them medicinally, how to grow them, etc., we are doing an in-person herbal workshop here at the Farmstead in September with both myself and Dr. Patrick Jones. So we'll put a link below if that's one of the workshops that you would like to come and attend and do a deep dive immersive. It'll be a all full day in-person event. So we've got the elderberries here and I've got them spread. We did in this, creating a hedgerow with them. So I want to have them about 15 feet apart, just because they will actually get pretty large once they begin to fill in. It'll just take them a few years to do that, but it'll also set a really nice backdrop, and it's close enough to the medicinal herb garden that this will kind of all flow together. If you want to learn more about elderberries specifically and making elderberry syrup, then you can go and check out this video as well.